I couldn't believe the certified letter in my hands. A $500 fine for unauthorized water feature installation without proper HOA approval. My private lake. On my own land. Land my grandfather had owned since 1946. The irony might have been laughable if it wasn't so infuriating. Especially considering what I'd discovered last week. My name is Kyle Kennedy, and until 6 months ago, I was just a regular small-town contractor trying to make an honest living on my family's ancestral property outside of Millfield. Now I was caught in a nightmare of property disputes, threats, and increasingly bizarre power plays from Millfield Estates HOA president, Karen Pritchard. It all started when I inherited my grandfather's 85-acre property after his passing. Most of it was undeveloped woodland with a beautiful 12-acre natural lake tucked away in the back. My grandfather's modest cabin sat at the front of the property, just off the main road. The rest had been untouched for decades. I'd planned to renovate the cabin and eventually build a proper house by the lake. It was peaceful there. After 2 tours in Afghanistan, peace was exactly what the VA therapist said I needed. What I didn't need was Karen Pritchard's manicured fingernails tapping at my door at 7:30 on a Saturday morning. "Mr. Kennedy, I'm Karen Pritchard, president of Millfield Estates Homeowners Association." Her smile didn't reach her eyes as she handed me a business card with the HOA logo embossed in gold. "I understand you've moved in recently, and I wanted to personally welcome you to our community." I took the card, confused. "Thanks, but I'm not part of any community. This is private property." Karen's smile tightened. "Well, technically you are part of Millfield Estates. The previous owner signed the agreement when we incorporated 5 years ago." "Previous owner?" "My grandfather never mentioned joining an HOA, and he owned this place until he died 3 months ago." Something flickered across her face, surprise, maybe concern, before her professional smile returned. "There must be some confusion. Our records show this parcel was included in our development plan. You'll need to review your HOA guidelines." She thrust a thick binder toward me. "Particularly the sections about external modifications, landscaping requirements, and water features." "Water features?" "Yes, we've had reports about an unauthorized pond on the property." I almost laughed. "You mean the lake? That's been there since the Ice Age. Natural or not, all water features require proper documentation and safety measures." She peered past me into the cabin. "And I notice you've been doing renovations. Those would need to be approved as well." I was about to argue when my phone rang, my foreman calling about a job across town. I needed to go. "Look, Ms. Pritchard, Mrs. Pritchard, I need to handle this call. I'll look over your materials, but I'm pretty sure there's been a misunderstanding. The HOA meeting is Thursday at 7 p.m. I expect to see your renovation plans and water feature documentation then." She turned and walked toward a gleaming white Mercedes SUV parked in my driveway. I closed the door, tossed the binder on the kitchen counter, and forgot about it as I rushed to my job site. That was my first mistake. The letter about the $500 fine arrived exactly 1 week after Karen's visit. I hadn't attended the HOA meeting, partly because I was working late and partly because I was convinced this was all a bizarre error. My grandfather would never have joined an HOA. He was fiercely independent and valued his privacy above all else. After the fine notice, I decided it was time to get serious. I pulled out the property deed and my grandfather's will, both of which clearly stated that I was the sole owner of all 85 acres, including the lake. There was no mention of an HOA, covenant, or easement. The next morning, I drove to the county clerk's office. "I need to see all records related to this property," I told the clerk, sliding the parcel number across the counter. The older woman, Alice, recognized me. "Kyle Kennedy! I haven't seen you since high school. Heard you were back. How are you holding up since your grandfather passed?" "Managing, thanks. Just trying to sort out some confusion about the property." Alice's fingers flew across the keyboard. "Let's see what we've got." That's interesting." "What is?" "Well, according to our records, your property is 85 acres as you said, but..." She turned the screen so I could see. See this line here? About 7 years ago, there was a request to rezone the back portion of your property for residential development. That can't be right. My grandfather would never have agreed to that. Alice scrolled through more documents. The request was denied because the owner never consented. But then 3 years later, there's a different filing showing a successful rezoning. She frowned at the screen. And then permits for house construction starting about 2 years ago. My stomach dropped. Show me on a map, please. Alice pulled up the county GIS system and overlaid the property lines. What I saw made my blood run cold. The entire northeast corner of my property, about 15 acres including part of the lake, had been redrawn as part of Millfield Estates Phase 3. This can't be legal. My grandfather never sold any of his land. There's a signature here. Alice squinted at the screen. But it doesn't look like your grandfather's. I knew Walter Kennedy my whole life, and this isn't his signature. I took photos of everything on the screen and requested printed copies of all documents. I need to talk to my lawyer. As I was leaving, Alice called after me. Kyle, you should know, Karen Pritchard's husband is on the county zoning board. Has been for almost a decade. The pieces were starting to fit together, and the picture they formed was ugly. My lawyer, James Harrington, reviewed the documents with a deepening frown. This is textbook fraud, Kyle. The signature on this transfer document is clearly forged. Your grandfather's authentic signature from his will and other documents doesn't match this at all. So what do we do? First, we file a formal challenge to the rezoning based on the fraudulent documentation. Then we get a survey crew out there to mark your actual property lines according to the original deed. And the HOA? James laughed without humor. They have no jurisdiction over you. Your property was never legally incorporated into their association. I'll draft a cease and desist letter immediately. 2 days later, I was standing on the shore of my lake with a survey crew when an unfamiliar car came bouncing down the dirt road. Karen Pritchard emerged, looking like she'd just bitten into something sour. What exactly do you think you're doing, Mr. Kennedy? She marched toward me, designer heels sinking into the soft earth. Getting my property properly surveyed, Mrs. Pritchard. Turns out there's been some confusion about where my land ends. There's no confusion whatsoever. This area is part of Millfield Estates. Those houses, she pointed across the lake where I could see rooftops through the trees, are part of our community, and this lake serves as our scenic water feature. Interesting theory, I replied. Except my family has owned this entire parcel, including the lake, since 1946. I have the original deed and all subsequent tax records to prove it. Karen's face flushed. Your grandfather agreed to sell this section for our development. Everything was properly filed. With a forged signature? That's a bold claim, Mrs. Pritchard. The survey team leader approached. Sir, we've confirmed the original property markers. According to the legal deed, your property line extends approximately 200 yards beyond those houses on the far side. Karen's face went from flushed to pale. That's impossible. We have all the proper permits and approvals. Based on fraudulent documents, I replied. My lawyer is already in touch with the county prosecutor's office. You have no idea who you're dealing with, Karen hissed, her composed facade cracking. My husband is on the zoning board, yes, I know. That makes this situation even more interesting from a legal perspective, doesn't it? Karen took a step toward me, finger raised. Listen to me very carefully. If you pursue this, you'll regret it. We have resources you couldn't imagine. Are you threatening me, Mrs. Pritchard? I'm informing you of reality. Millfield Estates represents over $30 million in real estate. We have the best lawyers in the state. You're a contractor with a cabin. Do the math. With that, she turned and stalked back to her car, phone already pressed to her ear. The survey team looked uncomfortable. Should we continue, sir? Absolutely. Mark every boundary exactly according to the legal deed. As I watched Karen's car disappear down the dirt road, I realized this was just the beginning of what would likely be a very ugly fight. The next morning, I woke to the sound of machinery. Heavy machinery. I threw on clothes and rushed outside to find a bulldozer and excavator parked at the edge of my property, near the path leading to the lake. A work crew in Millfield Estates logoed vests stood examining blueprints. "What the hell is going on here?" I demanded as I approached. A man in a hard hat looked up. "Lake Access Improvement Project. HOA approved. This is private property. You need to leave immediately." The foreman looked confused. "We have permits and authorization from Millfield Estates HOA. I don't care what you have. This isn't their land to authorize work on." I pulled out my phone and called the sheriff while the work crew exchanged uncomfortable glances. Within 20 minutes, Sheriff Tom Davis arrived, looking annoyed at having been called out so early. "What seems to be the problem here, Kyle?" I explained the situation while showing him the property survey completed the previous day. The sheriff reviewed the documents, then turned to the work crew. "Folks, I'm going to have to ask you to hold off on any work here until this property dispute is resolved. Pack up and head out for now." The foreman wasn't happy but complied. As the machines rumbled away, Sheriff Davis turned to me. "Kyle, I've known you since you were a kid, so I'm giving you some friendly advice. The Pritchards have significant influence in this county. Tread carefully. Are you saying I should just let them steal my land?" Davis held up his hands. "I'm saying document everything, follow proper legal channels, and watch your back. Karen Pritchard doesn't lose gracefully." After the sheriff left, I walked down to the lake to inspect what the crew had been planning. Near the shore, I found survey stakes with bright orange ribbons marking what appeared to be the outline of a large structure, some kind of boathouse or pavilion, from the looks of it. I pulled out every stake and threw them in the back of my truck. Then I returned to the cabin and called my lawyer. "James, they're escalating. I need something more than a cease and desist letter. I'm working on getting an emergency injunction, but the judge who handles these matters is on vacation until next week. And in the meantime, document everything. Set up cameras if you can. And Kyle, be careful. People who commit fraud aren't usually known for their ethical boundaries." That afternoon, I installed wildlife cameras disguised as birdhouses at strategic points around my property. If anyone came back, I'd have evidence. I also decided it was time to introduce myself to my neighbors, the people whose houses apparently sat on my land. The Millfield Estates houses built along what they called Lakeside Drive were impressive, 4,000+ square foot craftsman-style homes with manicured lawns sloping down toward my lake. I parked my truck and approached the closest house, where a woman was gardening. "Excuse me," I called. "I'm Kyle Kennedy. I own the property on the other side of the lake." The woman stood, brushing dirt from her hands. "Amanda Jordan. Nice to meet you." She smiled warmly. "We've wondered who lived over there. Karen just tells us it's undeveloped HOA land. Actually, that's why I'm here. There seems to be some confusion about property lines. This may come as a shock, but according to county records and a survey I just completed, my family's property line extends about 200 yards beyond your house." Amanda's smile vanished. "That's impossible. We purchased this lot from Millfield Development Corporation 3 years ago. I'm afraid they sold you something they didn't legally own. My grandfather never sold this land, and his signature was forged on documents filed with the county." Amanda looked stricken. "Are you saying our house is built on stolen land?" I softened my tone. "I'm saying you may be an innocent victim in this situation. Have you ever noticed anything unusual about your property documents or dealings with the HOA?" Amanda hesitated, then said, "Let me get my husband. And maybe you should talk to some of the other homeowners too." Within an hour, I was sitting in Amanda and Keith Jordan's living room with 5 neighboring couples, all looking various combinations of concerned, angry, and terrified. "We paid $850,000 for this house," said Richard Barnes, a physician at the local hospital. "Are you telling us our homes are built on land that wasn't legally for sale?" "Based on everything I've uncovered so far, yes," I replied. The developer somehow managed to rezone and sell parts of my family's property without legal authorization. But we have deeds, titles, everything," protested Elizabeth Cooper, clutching her husband's arm. "Which were processed based on fraudulent documents," I explained. "I'm not here to threaten you. I believe you're all victims too. I'm just trying to understand what happened." Amanda Jordan had been quiet, thumbing through a file of papers she'd retrieved from her office. "There's something odd about our closing documents," she said finally. "The title insurance specifically excludes prior claims related to boundary disputes or rezoning challenges. I remember asking about it at closing, but the attorney, who was recommended by Karen Pritchard, said it was standard language." "It's absolutely not standard," said Tom Miller, another homeowner who worked in real estate. "That's a massive red flag." The conversation continued for another hour, with each homeowner discovering similar exclusions or irregularities in their documents. By the time I left, we had formed an unlikely alliance. The homeowners agreed to share all their paperwork with my attorney and to keep our conversation confidential while we investigated further. As I drove back to my cabin, I felt simultaneously validated and sick to my stomach. This wasn't just about me anymore. There were innocent families whose entire life savings were tied up in homes built on stolen land. The question was, how high did this fraud go, and who needed to be held accountable? The next morning brought another certified letter, this one a notice of lien against my property for unpaid HOA dues and accumulated fines, totaling $16,750. According to the letter, I owed monthly dues dating back 5 years, plus fines for various violations including unauthorized renovation, improper lakefront maintenance, and failure to attend mandatory HOA meetings. I called James immediately. "They're trying to force a legal battle on multiple fronts," he said after I read him the lien notice. "It's a classic tactic, overwhelm someone with limited resources until they give up or settle. I'm not settling. I didn't think you would. Good news is, I've been doing some digging. The Millfield Development Corporation that built these homes is registered to Robert Pritchard, Karen's husband. Their son-in-law Thomas Grayson is listed as the chief financial officer. So it's a family business. Gets better. Guess who was the notary on the document transferring your grandfather's land? Karen herself. Isn't that illegal? She directly benefits from the transaction. Highly illegal, and exactly the kind of evidence we need. I've scheduled a meeting with the district attorney tomorrow morning." I hung up feeling cautiously optimistic, until headlights swung into my driveway around 9 p.m. I looked out to see Karen Pritchard stepping out of her Mercedes, alone this time. Against my better judgment, I opened the door before she could knock. "Mr. Kennedy," she said, her voice artificially pleasant. "I thought we should have a private conversation, neighbor to neighbor." "We're not neighbors, Mrs. Pritchard. And anything you have to say can go through my attorney. Don't be difficult." She stepped forward as if to enter, but I remained blocking the doorway. Her smile faltered. "Fine. I'm here to offer you a solution that benefits everyone." "I'm listening." "Millfield Estates is prepared to purchase your remaining property, the portions not already incorporated into our development, for $3 million. That's significantly above market value." I couldn't help but laugh. "So your solution to fraudulently taking my land is to buy the rest of it?" "I'm not admitting to anything," Karen said sharply. "But I am offering you a very generous opportunity to resolve this situation without costly legal battles. The alternative—" She let the threat hang in the air. "The alternative is that I pursue this fraud case all the way to criminal charges, and those houses built on my land become my legal property." Karen's composure finally cracked. "You stupid, stubborn man. Do you have any idea what you're up against? My husband sits on the zoning board and the county commission. My brother-in-law is a superior court judge. You think your little evidence and your small-town lawyer are going to win against that? I think the FBI tends to take a dim view of real estate fraud, public corruption, and criminal conspiracy, regardless of who's involved. And they're very interested in cases where local officials abuse their positions for personal gain. It was a bluff. I hadn't contacted the FBI. But Karen's face told me I'd struck a nerve. "You're making a terrible mistake," she hissed. "This offer expires at midnight. After that, we'll destroy you." After she left, I immediately checked my hidden cameras. I had the entire conversation recorded from 2 angles, including her thinly veiled threats and admission of her family's positions of power. I sent the footage to James with a simple message: "Time to go federal." The next week was suspiciously quiet. Too quiet. No more letters, no harassment, no construction crews. Even my calls to James went straight to voicemail, with only a brief text saying he was working on something big and would contact me soon. Then Amanda Jordan called, sounding anxious. "Kyle, there's an emergency HOA meeting tonight. Karen's saying she's resolved the nuisance claim from the squatter on HOA property and that everything is fine now." "What?" "I haven't agreed to anything. That's not all. They've hired a security company to patrol the lake and prevent trespassing. The first guards start tomorrow. They can't do that. It's my property." "I know, but…" "Kyle, people are scared. Karen's convinced everyone that if they support you, they could lose their homes." "Tell me about the meeting." 7 p.m. at the community center. Homeowners only." I hung up and tried James again. Still no answer. With few options left, I decided to crash the HOA meeting myself. The Millfield Estates Community Center was a tasteful stone building overlooking the lake, my lake. I arrived early and parked down the street, watching as luxury cars pulled into the lot and well-dressed homeowners filed inside. At 6:55, I entered and took a seat in the back. People glanced at me nervously, but no one said anything until Karen arrived with her entourage, her husband Robert, a distinguished-looking man in his 60s, their daughter Melissa, son-in-law Thomas, and 2 men in suits who had "lawyer" written all over them. Karen spotted me immediately. "Mr. Kennedy, this meeting is for Millfield Estates homeowners only." "Perfect, then I definitely belong here, since apparently 15 of your homes are built on my property." Murmurs spread through the room. Karen's face hardened as she approached me. "I'll have you removed if necessary." "On what grounds?" "I haven't done anything disruptive." Robert Pritchard stepped forward. "Kyle, let's be reasonable. We've made you a very generous offer." "Which I declined." "Now, shouldn't we start the meeting? I'm curious to hear about this resolution you've supposedly reached." Karen looked like she might argue further, but instead turned and marched to the front of the room. "Let's begin," she announced, tapping a gavel. "First item. The property dispute has been resolved. The nuisance claim has been." The main doors swung open, and James entered, accompanied by a woman in a dark suit who radiated authority. "Sorry to interrupt," James called out, "but that statement is false, and continuing to make it could constitute additional fraud charges." Karen's face flushed with anger. "Who is this?" "Security." The woman beside James held up a badge. "Special Agent Allison Park, FBI. I'd advise against calling security, Mrs. Pritchard." The room erupted in confused murmurs. "What is the meaning of this?" Robert Pritchard demanded. "The meaning, Mr. Pritchard, is that we're here to inform this community about an active federal investigation into real estate fraud, corruption, and criminal conspiracy involving Millfield Development Corporation and several county officials." Agent Park moved to the front of the room while Karen and Robert exchanged panicked glances. "Ladies and gentlemen," Agent Park addressed the crowd, "my team has been reviewing evidence provided by Mr. Kennedy and his attorney, along with county records and financial transactions associated with this development. We have reason to believe that the land many of your homes are built on was fraudulently acquired through forged documents and corrupt zoning practices." One of Karen's lawyers attempted to interrupt, but Agent Park continued. "To be clear, the homeowners here are considered victims, not perpetrators. Our investigation is focused on those who orchestrated this scheme." A man stood up from the audience. "What does this mean for our homes? Our investments?" That's a complex legal question that will depend on how this case resolves, Agent Park replied. But I can tell you that Mr. Kennedy has expressed his desire to find a solution that doesn't displace innocent homeowners. All eyes turned to me. I stood up. I never wanted this fight. I just wanted to live peacefully on my family's land. But I can't ignore theft and fraud, especially on this scale. I looked directly at Karen. That said, I understand these families purchased their homes in good faith. I don't want them to suffer for someone else's crimes. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Karen finally recovered her voice. This meeting is adjourned, she announced, grabbing her husband's arm and heading for the side door. Mrs. Pritchard, Agent Park called. I'd advise against leaving town. We'll need to speak with you officially very soon. As the Pritchards hurried out, Amanda Jordan approached me. Is it true? Do you really not want to take our homes? Of course not. You're victims too. But we need to figure out a fair solution. The meeting dissolved into smaller conversations, with Agent Park answering questions from concerned homeowners and James explaining the legal process ahead. As I stepped outside for some air, I found myself staring across the lake at my grandfather's land. Despite everything, it was still beautiful in the evening light. Mr. Kennedy? I turned to find Thomas Grayson, Karen's son-in-law and the CFO of Millfield Development, looking nervously over his shoulder. Mr. Grayson? I can't be seen talking to you, but there's something you should know. I have documents, originals, showing exactly how this happened. Who authorized what, who signed off on the forgeries. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm not going to prison for the Pritchards. Karen orchestrated everything. She found out your grandfather had dementia before anyone else knew, and she saw an opportunity. I was just following orders, keeping the books. You should talk to the FBI. I'm planning to. I just wanted you to know that some of us were caught up in something we didn't fully understand. He glanced nervously toward the parking lot. I need to go before they see me talking to you. As Grayson hurried away, James joined me outside. Well, that was dramatic. Did I see you talking to the son-in-law? Apparently, rats are already abandoning the ship. He claims to have documentation proving Karen masterminded the whole thing. James nodded. That tracks with what we found. Karen identified vulnerable property owners, used her husband's position to push through rezoning without proper notification, and forged documents as needed. The whole family profited, but she was the architect. What happens now? Now we let the FBI do their thing. Meanwhile, we need to figure out a fair resolution for the homeowners. I have some ideas about that. The following weeks brought a flurry of activity. The FBI executed search warrants on the Pritchards' home, the Millfield Development offices, and even certain county departments. Karen, Robert, and 2 county officials were arrested on multiple charges including fraud, forgery, corruption, and conspiracy. Thomas Grayson turned state's evidence, providing detailed records of the scheme that had targeted not just my grandfather's property but several other parcels around the county over the past decade. The most shocking revelation came when the FBI discovered that Karen had actually been monitoring my grandfather's medical records through an accomplice at his nursing home, waiting for his dementia diagnosis to make her move. As for the homeowners, James and I worked with the FBI victim specialists and a mediator to develop a solution. I would retain legal ownership of the land, but grant 99-year leases to the affected homeowners at a nominal yearly fee of $1. They would retain ownership of their homes and full usage rights to the property they believed they had purchased. In exchange, the community would establish a conservation easement around the lake, protecting it from future development, and ensuring it remained pristine for generations to come. 6 months after Karen crashed into my life with her fake smiles and real threats, I stood on the shore of my lake, now officially recognized as Kennedy Lake on county maps, watching families picnic and children play along the shore. Amanda Jordan approached, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She'd become something of a friend through this ordeal, eventually taking over as interim HOA president after Karen's arrest. The new community bylaws passed unanimously, she said, handing me a cup. No more dictatorial powers for the HOA president, and explicit recognition of your property rights. That's good to hear. The conservation easement documents are being filed next week. Once that's done, the lake will be protected forever, just like you wanted. I nodded, watching a blue heron land gracefully across the water. My grandfather would have liked that. You know, for someone who had every right to be vindictive, you've been incredibly fair. These families didn't do anything wrong. They just wanted nice homes by a beautiful lake. I can understand that. Still, most people would have fought harder, demanded more. I shrugged. Maybe. But I've seen enough fighting to last a lifetime. Sometimes the best victory is the one where nobody loses, except the people who actually did something wrong. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a news alert. Former HOA president sentenced to 15 years for fraud scheme. I showed Amanda the headline, and she smiled. Justice served. Justice served, I agreed, raising my coffee cup in a toast. Across the lake, the sun glinted off the water, catching in a spray of light as a fish jumped. My lake. My land. But now, somehow, also a community where I belong. Sometimes you don't get to choose your battles, but you do get to choose how you fight them. And sometimes, just sometimes, doing the right thing actually works out in the end.